Jury selection for the trial of an Indiana man accused of killing two teen girls is set to begin today. Richard Allen is charged in the deaths of Abigail Williams and Liberty German. Their bodies were found along a wooded trail in Delphi, Indiana. This was back in 2017. Allen has been behind bars since his arrest 2 years ago. He has pleaded not guilty, and that trial is being held about 100 miles from Delphi. And opening statements are scheduled to begin on Friday. Joining me now, I have criminal defense attorney Josh Ritter. He's also host of the Courtroom Confidential podcast. Josh, you and I have talked about this case at length before. This is one of the most high-profile cases in Indiana history. I can't imagine there's a person in the state who doesn't know this case. So how hard will it be to find an impartial jury?
You make an excellent point. It was a case that had such a local significance because you're talking about the loss of life of two very young girls in a small community, but then it had a broader significance all throughout Indiana, and we're even talking about it nationally. So yeah, in those types of situations, you're always going to run into some difficulty of people who know too much about the case, that they've already made up their minds, that they have some biases going into the case. They've already decided the fate of the defendant before they've even heard any of the evidence. So the attorneys are going to have their hands full, not to say that it's impossible, but they're going to have to just make sure that they take particular time to give some attention to those who may have some preconceived ideas about the case before going into jury selection.
And just off the top, I mentioned, taking place 100 miles away. Correct me if I'm wrong, Josh. I think that's where, jurors are being chosen in Fort Wayne, Indiana. Then they're being transported to Delphi for the actual trial. Talk about how charged that courthouse will be with an entire city fighting for justice for these two girls for so long.
No, you're absolutely right. And you make a very good point, too, that it has been a long time. This went unsolved for several years. This community was really hurting because they were in fear. This was a senseless crime. You're talking about two young girls who were doing about as innocent thing as you can. They were taking a hike in the middle of the day, and they lost their lives or had their lives taken from them in this really tragic and violent way. And so it caused, it was kind of the thing that almost the only thing people were talking about for a very significant period of time. That courtroom is going to have a lot of attention.
Yeah, I'm sure you're like me. I listened to that Down the Hill podcast years ago, and it still remains the eeriest and most well-done podcast I think I've ever listened to. And it got me hooked on the case. The other thing I found interesting, Josh, the judge has barred phones, laptops, cameras. There's no even audio allowed for this case. Why would he decide that for a case that's garnered so much public interest?
In these cases that are high profile, sometimes you get some decisions made by judges that are outside of the norm. You would hope for more transparency in the case with this much attention, but the judge felt that she needed to protect the integrity of the case by having a pretty significant gag order, which included not only no cameras, but there's no electronic devices for any reporters. So all of the reporting that we're going to be getting from inside the courtroom is just going to be based off of handwritten notes taken by reporters who are inside.
Yeah, who will then have to run out and share the latest with the world. Joshua Ritter, I know you'll be watching closely, as will I. Thank you so much, as always, for your time. Thanks for watching, everybody. Go to joinnn.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. Also, don't forget to click that red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.